All right, I'm going to start this one and give you a little caveat, a little warning, a little qualifier. This is really swampy. I mean, you can't get any swampier Washington, D.C., inside the Beltway crappy than a Supreme Court, a SCOTUS decision. But there's also nothing more important, because this thing, what they did yesterday in screwing up this mail-in ballot decision, it affects all of us. But I bring you hope, which I always try to do. The hope is this just made, in my opinion, in my worldview, this just made the Save America Act the number one priority over everything within the Trump administration. That affects everybody. This is why it matters. All right. It also begs the question, was Amy Coney Barrett Trump's worst decision? I used to think it was putting the healthcare bureaucrats like Fauci in charge of COVID because he had no other choice. But no, this lady may be his, so we'll get to all that. It also points this out. We used to think for the longest time that Supreme Court justices just like lived in their own world. They only hung out with each other, maybe never took the robes off, but they never paid attention to outside influence. Oh, no. Yes, they absolutely do. They see their press clippings. They're probably on social media. They hear what people say about them. They're supposed to rule with neither fear nor favor. They certainly do in cases like this, and we'll get to it. Anyways, welcome in. Thanks for finding the Wicked Radio live stream and podcast on X and YouTube and Facebook and the replay on those same channels and the audio podcast wherever you like to get them. All right, let's get right to it. I'm going to start with, this is also different from me. I'm going to start with the dissent from Justice Alito. And this is a lot of Supreme Court stuff here, but we'll break it down for, in real people terms. Don't worry about that. And let's start with the dissent from a Supreme Court justice that actually makes sense, because this will set the entire thing up. Justice Alito yesterday. Finally, today's decision leaves open opportunities for voter fraud that may further undermine America's faith in the integrity of this country's elections. Goes on to say and wraps it up by saying, it's not difficult to understand why. I'm not going to get into the weeds of this entire thing. I'm just going to tell you, here was the decision yesterday with Justice John Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett, the mistake, and she's going to be there a long time, siding with the liberal judges to decide that election day doesn't mean election day. It could be an election month. It could mean election months. Could mean, under their interpretation, election year. Talking about these mail-in ballots and that they decided that there's no rule that there's no law that they can point to that doesn't say that states can't decide on their own, depending on if they want it to be, that they can keep on voting, keep on counting votes forever and ever and ever. You know where I'm going with this whole thing. I'm not going to go into the weeds of the entire decision, but that's exactly what it is. That's what they decided yesterday. And again, I'll tell you this. There's hope, though. And the hope comes in the Save America Act because there's never been more of a priority. We'll get to President Trump's reaction in a second here, but here's a stronger reaction from a guy that has President Trump's ear, number one, but also is very close to him in policy decisions. It's Stephen Miller, and that's why the liberal media is always attacking him time after time after time. He was on Fox yesterday, and he's given a bunch of reactions to a bunch of different rulings and all this other stuff, but especially this Supreme Court ruling. And here's what he said directly. Remember, this is the guy that probably of anybody has Trump's closest confidence. And this is the tone we should all understand of what's coming out of the White House.
Well, look, let's just call it like it is. Justice Roberts and Justice Barrett decided to cave to the radical left. Alito was so clear in his wording about what election day means. Nobody could read the statute, could read that opinion, could read what Alito wrote and come to any other conclusion. It's election day, not election week, not election month, not election months. So this was really a travesty, and it underscores, Laura, why we have to keep fighting to pass the Save America Act. 80 million Americans elected a Republican Senate majority, and they elected a Republican Congress to deliver on this fundamental priority. It must get done.
It must get done. That's the guy, remember, and I repeat it again for a reason. That's the guy he's next, he's probably standing close to and talking to President Trump the most, is Stephen Miller, and he's saying that. Now, he's not making it up. Trump's saying the same thing. Let's go back a little bit to last week where Trump finally called in all these useless, absolutely wimpy, spineless Senate Republicans who aren't getting this thing done, even though the whole country wants voter ID. And he called them in a meeting, and Trump comes out. I remember, we talked about this, and he goes, we had a great meeting. It's awesome. We love our leader, all this other stuff, right? Okay, that was one thing. That was the nice version of Trump outside. You saw John Thune, Senate leader's face, and he looked like he had just gotten punched in the throat. Trump put on a nice act outside for the media after the fact. I'm sure it wasn't as nice in the room. Let me ask you this. Can you imagine now how pissed off is Trump now that this Supreme Court, because if the Supreme Court did the right thing and actually had common sense, and if Amy Coney Barrett and John Roberts hadn't sided with the leftist judges, the pressure's off everybody. And this may be what they were all waiting for, right? Because all the useless rhino Republicans have to go back to their home districts, and they're going to face all this scrutiny from the other rhino voters and say why they passed the SAVE Act and you're cheating elections, all this other crap, right? If the Supreme Court had just decided and done the right thing, decided that Election Day mail-in ballots needed to be counted by the end of Election Day, the pressure's off everybody. Well, now the pressure's on. So now the game changes. Now it's all different. Now Trump's going to go ballistic on them. Good for all of us. They're going to face more pressure than anybody ever has. Good for us. And they have to get this thing done. This is why I say, and you heard the words there, right, from Stephen Miller, right-hand man these days of President Trump, Save America Act has become the priority. All right, Trump's reaction himself. In my opinion, and we've all seen so much of Trump. Even if you don't pay a lot of attention to the news because he's such a newsmaker and he's out there so much. He does so much press. He talks to the press so much. He does so much media. The media does so much coverage of him. You really get a sense, unless you're completely just tone deaf, of how he feels about something. His reaction right after the Supreme Court decision came in, I would have to say he's pretty pissed off. That's my reaction. So here's his direct reaction. Then we'll get into a social media post he did last night.
Do you have any questions?
Mr. President, what do you make of the Supreme Court ruling today in regards to the mail-in ballots, and what comes next for the SAVE Act after today's ruling?
Well, because of the mail-in ballot ruling, which was a little bit surprising, gives people more time to vote illegally, let's say. But the SAVE Act is even more important, and that's the right. You have to be a citizen of our country. Okay, you have to show you're a citizen of our country, called citizenship. Voter ID by photo voter ID, and no mail-in ballots unless you're in the military, disabled, you're ill, or you're away, or even on a vacation. We're being very open about it. It's pretty easy.
How simple is that? How common sense is that? And let's not forget about this too, the states that actually can do it. I'm a resident of Florida. Florida was a mess with elections not too long ago. If you're old enough, if you remember those days, and I lived through it too, being on the air every day, facing questions about this, remember the hanging Chad thing, the whole hanging Chad saga of 2000 in that election, which, eventually was so razor thin that it got President Bush elected. Not only that, Ron DeSantis won by a handful of votes, and by I mean a handful was into the hundreds. Can you imagine if that went the other way? I can't. I wouldn't be here right now. I'll completely be honest with you. I would have been broke. My businesses would have been gone if the other lunatic got elected. But look how quickly it can turn around. That's the hope in this whole thing. Florida now gets its election, and is one of the biggest states population-wise, gets its election day done on Election Day by the time night. All 67 counties in Florida get done, counted, certified in record time. If this state can turn things around that fast, everybody can, including this broken entity we're calling the United States these days. Everybody can get that done. How simple is that? Exactly what the president laid out yesterday, right after the decision. And tell me I'm wrong. Did you get the same impression too? He's facing the question. He goes, anybody have any questions? Well, it's ridiculous. And he laid out the points again for the Save America Act. That's Trump being nice. You could tell on his face that he's pissed off about this, but that's Trump being nice. I think the days of him even being, bureaucratic about this, or nice, or sitting on the fence, or trying to save face for these other useless rhinos that aren't passing the SAVE Act, I think that's done. I think and that's good news for all of us. I think he's going to go absolutely ballistic on all of the rhinos like John Thune who aren't getting the Save America passed, who are getting in the way of it. That's my take anyway. Also followed up that press statement yesterday with a social media statement last night, which, again, I won't read the entire thing, but he laid out the case again with 3 simple points. Went on to say last night, in light of the tremendous loss in the Supreme Court, interesting, by the way, when do you ever hear President Trump say something was a loss? Very, very rarely. That's how serious he takes this. Tremendous loss in the Supreme Court today concerning voters' rights and the fact that people's votes are allowed to be counted long after election over, and they made the same points again. Number one, all voters must show ID, identification. All voters must show proof of citizenship. Number three, no mail-in ballots except for illness, disability, military deployment, or travel. Exactly what he said in the Oval Office. How simple is that? It's the simplest thing in the world, and it can be done. I would watch this, though. I would watch what happens behind closed doors. I would read between the lines. I would look at the expression on his face. There's nothing after this. There's nothing more important now than getting this passed, because it's absolutely brutal. You had every left-wing lunatic on every left-wing outlet jumping up and down yesterday. This is a big celebration for voters' rights. How? How do you even make that statement? And they know this is like an 85% popularity. Even with Democrats, this thing is like 87% approval. Gee, what a concept. You got to show voter ID. You have to prove that you're a real person, number one, and you're a real person that lives in this country, number two, to actually vote in our elections. Crazy talk, right? That's just absolutely crazy talk. But now we're at the point where everybody has to push this thing. It's no longer, we're all going to enjoy America's birthday coming up in days. We're all going to enjoy the 250. We're all going to be this. No better time. No better time as we're all talking patriotic stuff than to push this and the importance of it. You got somebody in your life that doesn't understand how important it is, talk to them. Do that. You're in a state where you have some of these useless, absolutely useless, ridiculous, do-nothing senators who are getting in the way of this, who are actively working to get the Save America Act passed. Call them, email them, write them, whatever it is. You see them at an event, shout it out. Tell them to get this thing passed. It's that important. And I think this is the sole focus going forward. To wrap this entire thing up, let's go to the endless wisdom and simplicity of Senator John Kennedy, who restates everything we already know, everything we've already said, but nobody quite says it like him.
As to the SAVE Act, I think we ought to pass it. The SAVE Act, to me, I'm a co-sponsor. It means two things. It means that to vote in America, you have to prove you are who you say you are to be able to vote. You have to have an ID at the polls, and you have to be an American citizen. And number two, it means that we ought to go back to having an election day, not an election month. We need to know who the winner is on election night.
I don't know. Can't say it any simpler than that, but I think simplicity is the power here. It's really that simple in explaining it to anybody. Because what are you going to do? How do you vote against this? Well, they used to try this one. Remember this excuse? Not everybody can get a voter. Not everybody can get identification. Who in this day and age cannot get an ID if you're a legal resident of this country? It's easy. It's almost hard not to be able to get identification these days. Well, this would keep people from voting in the poll. How? How would this prevent anybody? Well, this would trample people's election rights. How? How is this? Well, this is, remember Chucky Schumer? This is Jim Crow 2.0. What? Actually being able to show voter ID and not allowing people who aren't residents and citizens of this country or dead to have their names counted on a ballot would actually help African Americans in this country. There's no argument against it except the one that you've always known, that we've always known. If you're against the Save America Act, if you're against voter ID, if you're against securing our elections, there's one reason and one reason only. You want to cheat elections. Don't let them do it, because this is ridiculous. But again, as ridiculous as this decision was yesterday, and thank God we don't have to spend every single day on here talking about Supreme Court decisions, but this is a big one because it affects everybody's daily life. It really does. Thankfully, I think anyway, this is going to spur on action and priority at making this Save America Act and securing our elections. The counter effect to this stupid decision was maybe we actually are going to get secure elections. So we'll see. Hopefully anyway. All right. Maybe lighter stuff tomorrow. Back to talking about America's 250. Who the hell knows? But we'll find out. If it's affecting your life, we'll break it down in some wicked wisdom and wit. I hope anyway. Thanks for finding me. I appreciate you. Wicked Radio live stream on X and YouTube and Facebook, 8 a.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday, then the replay. But the audio podcast available for you wherever you like to get those. That's Apple and Spotify and iHeart and all that other stuff. And Spreaker, I guess, where you can find it too. Just look for me and you can find it. It's easy, and do whatever they want you to do on there. Make it a wicked awesome Tuesday. Remember, talk to everybody you can about securing our elections. It matters now. It always mattered, but now it especially matters. I'll talk to you tomorrow.